Action.
I've noticed that trailers for shows are often better than the shows they're trailing. I was determined not to fall into that trap for my new series of Happy Hour, so I made my own trailer. This is it. Dreadful, isn't it? It's a really, really rotten trailer. So, watch my new show. It's got to be better than this, isn't it? Okay.
Jack D's Happy Hour starts Friday at 10:35 on BBC One.
Now on BBC One, tonight's lottery results. In the National Lottery draw, the 6 winning numbers are confirmed as 12, 20, 23, 26, 33, 46, and the bonus number is 1. Early indications show that there are 4 lucky jackpot winners, winning just over £3 million each. The winning numbers in the lottery extra draw are 4, 11, 18, 19, 31 and 42. Early indications show that there are no winners tonight, which means the jackpot for the next draw has grown to an estimated £11 million. The National Lottery Thunderball numbers are confirmed as 16, 17, 30, 31, 34, and the Thunderball itself is number 7.
There's nothing quite like messing about on the river.
Yeah, tackle's looking a bit tighty there, Alan.
Ground Force. The new series starts tomorrow at 8 on BBC One.
Are you saying I'm whispering?
No, I'm whispering that you're whispering.
Well, I'm not. Anyway, who told you I had the ump?
Just heard a whisper, that's all.
Alistair McGowan's Big Impression starts tomorrow
On BBC One.
Daniel Day-Lewis and Pete Postlethwaite star in the film based on the story of the Guildford Four, In the Name of the Father, on BBC Two in 25 minutes. Here on BBC One, the news and sport with Nicholas Witchell and Hazel Irvin.
There have been more disturbances outside the summit of the Americas in Quebec. Police have used water cannon to douse anti-capitalist protesters. Mr. Hague says he never expected all his MPs to sign the CRE's race pledge. And confident of victory, Lennox Lewis prepares for the big fight. Good evening. There have been further disturbances outside a summit of North and South American leaders in Canada. Several hundred anti-capitalist protesters tried unsuccessfully to break through a police cordon and were driven back by police with water cannon and tear gas. In violent scenes last night, protesters did break through security lines and delayed the start of the summit. The leaders are meeting in Quebec to discuss creating the world's largest free trade zone. Our correspondent Nick Bryant is there.
The battle lines of modern-day summitry, police and protesters in an ugly standoff, just 200 yards from where 34 world leaders are gathered. There have been violent clashes for much of the afternoon. Water cannons brought in by the Canadian authorities to disperse a hard core of militants, but doing little to dampen the spirits of this hardy demonstrator. A 3-metre-high perimeter fence, the prime target of protesters. Many want to destroy what they call a wall of shame. Yesterday, the demonstrators managed to breach this section of fencing behind me, but today the police are here in greater numbers and their lines are holding firm. But at other flashpoints along the 2-mile perimeter, the demonstrators were more successful. They were watched by delegates, barred from leaving the conference centre. Inside the summit hall, George W. Bush and the other 33 leaders tried to rise above the fray, here to discuss the creation of the free trade area of the Americas, set to become the world's biggest trading bloc. The US president believes it will bolster democracy and help eradicate poverty. Got the power! But protesters argue it will damage the environment and erode workers' rights. Over 100 have been arrested, and their demonstrations have been much more than a violent distraction. They delayed the summit's opening ceremony, at times restricted delegates' movement. But the chief worry right now, that darkness will bring more trouble.
Well, let's get the latest now from Quebec. Nick, it looks tense, but by and large it seems to be pretty much under control so far.
The police do seem to have the situation contained, Nick. You're absolutely right, but just in the last few moments, right behind me, 100 yards from where the delegates and world leaders have been meeting, clashes between the police and demonstrators, the police firing tear gas into the crowd, one of the demonstrators simply picking up the canister and hurling it back. We've seen those scenes repeated all over Quebec City this afternoon, a number of flashpoints around this 2-mile perimeter fence which encircles the conference centre. But as I say, the police seem to have the situation under control, and no threat of the demonstrators breaking through the security cordon, as seemed likely at one stage yesterday. It seems that the water cannons, which weren't brought out onto the streets until today really, have worked. They've subdued the demonstrators' mood.
Nick Bryant in Quebec, thank you very much. Here, the Conservative leader William Hague has said he never expected all of his MPs and candidates to sign the Commission for Racial Equality's pledge on racial matters. Mr Hague's statement follows the refusal of several prominent Tories, including Michael Portillo, to put their names to the document. The Tory leader said racism had no place in the Conservative Party.
William, can I... It was a simple ceremony, but when William Hague signed an anti-racism pact 5 weeks ago, he committed every Conservative to honour it. His shadow chancellor was clearly on board, but when Michael Portillo revealed he would not actually sign the document himself, opponents were quick to question the party's sincerity. Today's statement is categoric. Mr Hague says racism has no place in the Conservative Party or its campaigning. Nevertheless, he goes on to say, I did not expect or require all candidates to sign the compact individually. Instead, the party chairman, Michael Ancram, will ensure every candidate abides by it, and he'll personally investigate alleged misconducts. Labour chose one of their long-standing campaigners on race to dismiss the statement as too little, too late.
If he really wants to show us his credentials, he's going to have to be very, very tough with the MPs who've already spoken out in what I would consider a near-racist way.
The Liberal Democrat leader, helping one of his candidates today to see off a Conservative challenge, claims that the last few days have totally ruined William Hague's credibility.
I think William Hague's position is increasingly untenable as every day goes by. If he can't lead his party in the United sense, he's certainly not fit to lead the country after a general election.
But at their party headquarters tonight, William Hague's staff insist their stance on race is now crystal clear and that the leader is firmly in control.
And Gitor Harry is outside Conservative Central Office now. Gitor, the Tories do seem to have rather walked into this one, don't they?
It all seems rather unnecessary, Nick. Either when William Hague signed on behalf of his party, he should have made it clear then that he was doing so and there was no need for any individual MP to also sign that pledge, or he should have shown that he really was in control of his party and actually made sure that every individual MP endorsed that. As it was, it looks as if he doesn't have that kind of control and grip on his party.
Do you sense that there is quite considerable unease amongst people who are not Tories about the way the CRE has handled this whole matter?
I think a number of MPs across the board are slightly uneasy about the tactics of the CRE. Conservatives talk of bullying and blackmail, but these, in the context of a run-up to a general election, are rather subtle arguments at a time when what's needed are clear signals. And the signals that the Conservatives needed to give out was that they're not racist, not extreme. The last few days have not really helped deliver that message loud and clear.
Gitor, thank you very much indeed. Within the past few minutes, police in London have said that a man and a woman have been charged this evening with the murder of Elizabeth Sherlock, who was killed after she was run over by a car. The car was being driven by thieves who'd stolen her handbag whilst Miss Sherlock was having a coffee at Euston Station in London. Protesters in Devon say they will continue to oppose the excavation of 18 burial pits to take the carcasses of animals slaughtered in the foot and mouth outbreak. The Ministry of Agriculture says the pits are necessary to clear a backlog of thousands of rotting animal remains. In Cumbria, government officials have apologised to a farmer after 500 of his animals were slaughtered by mistake because of a map reading error. There were a further 14 new cases today, bringing the total to 1,429.
Tonight, right across Devon, almost 200,000 dead animals still lie in fields and barns, killed because they were near infected farms. But disposing of them has been far from simple, with residents vigorously opposing a series of locations for pyres and burial sites. The government insists this site in North Devon will be used. It's designed to take hundreds of thousands of carcasses. 2 villages are within a mile of the site, and residents fear it could seep for up to 20 years.
It's an environmental disaster just waiting to happen, and yet they ride roughshod over the lot of us because they want to hide it down there.
We need to get these animals cleared away, but why can't they continue either burying them or burning them in small pyres on the farms?
In Cumbria, one farm has been the victim of a terrible mistake. In the rush to slaughter, Wayne Nuttall's whole herd of 500 sheep was killed. But it was the wrong farm. The government vet should have been at another one, 100 miles away.
More or less came and told us to get the sheep in, and the slaughtermen were on the way.
But you knew that there weren't any cases around here. Didn't you tell them that?
I told them, I said, I haven't heard of a case in Great Broughton. None of my neighbours have heard of a case in Great Broughton. They said, yes, they gave me the address and the name of the person it was.
This afternoon, Joanna Lumley led a demonstration at Downing Street, urging vaccination and less slaughter. But with the number of new cases still falling, the vaccination issue may go away.
Ministers and officials don't want to seem over-optimistic, but they are delighted that the numbers of new cases are still significantly lower than even a week ago. But keeping public support for their policies on vaccination and the disposal of dead animals remains difficult. Daniel Sandford, BBC News at the Ministry of Agriculture.
Thousands of demonstrators have been protesting outside the Dutch Parliament against the mass slaughter of animals. They're demanding a return to vaccination and the halt to what they say is the barbaric practice of killing healthy livestock.
They've come to the home of the Dutch Parliament to protest at a policy made in Brussels. These people want the slaughter of healthy animals to stop. They're demanding a return to vaccination, a policy that kept foot and mouth at bay for over 50 years.
There is another way to solve this, and that's to a kind of injection for the animals.
Killing, I think that's ridiculous. It's not the way. There is infection, so why don't use it?
So far, there have been 25 cases of foot and mouth here. Some 40,000 animals have been slaughtered. Enough, pleaded this farmer, addressing her remarks to the Food Safety Commissioner, David Byrne.
Dear Mr. Byrne, so you think everything in Holland is perfectly in control? Right now, people are busy killing our sheep, our goats, our pigs, and our cows.
Hundreds of thousands of people have signed petitions, thousands have turned out today. And what people say is they can't understand why there has been no similar protest in Britain against the mass slaughter of animals. John Sopel, BBC News, The Hague.
Peter Buck, the lead guitarist with the rock group REM, has been charged by police at Heathrow with criminal damage, assault and being drunk on an aircraft following an incident on a British Airways flight from Seattle. REM, one of the most influential groups of the past 20 years, are due to play in London a week tomorrow. Police are investigating the death of a car driver and his passenger in East London early this morning. Their car was shot at and careered out of control, hitting 3 women pedestrians. The 2 men were found dead inside the vehicle.
The twisted wreckage of the BMW convertible in which the 2 men died. At 5 o'clock this morning in Clapton in East London, shots were fired at the car. It drove off but hit 3 female pedestrians before colliding first with another car and then an oncoming bus. Police officers found the bodies of the driver and his passenger inside the wreckage. It's possible the passenger was killed by the gunfire before the car crashed. Detectives are appealing for help in what is a double murder inquiry.
I'm confident that, provided that we can tap into the local community, they will provide us with the intelligence and the evidence to make this inquiry a success.
2 of the injured women passers-by were later released from hospital. A third has been kept in, although her condition isn't said to be life-threatening. James Helm, BBC News.
2 British people are being questioned by Czech police as part of an investigation into an international paedophile ring. Police in Prague worked with Britain's National Criminal Intelligence Service to target the homes and businesses of suspected organisers, as well as carrying out raids on gay clubs and hostels in the city. A British oil worker who was kidnapped by rebels in Colombia 2 years ago has been found alive and well. Alistair Taylor from Aberdeen is still being held in a jungle camp by rebels who are demanding a multi-million-pound ransom. He was discovered by a freelance journalist working for a Scottish newspaper. The government has said it's unacceptable that 20 children in Northamptonshire have been refused places at secondary schools next term. Education officials have begun an urgent investigation into why 3 self-governing schools in Wellingborough have turned the pupils away. The schools say they're full.
Sarah Robertson hasn't been to school since before Christmas. Wellingborough's 3 secondaries say they're full. And because they're self-governing foundation schools, they can't be forced to take extra children without places.
Well, I'm 15, I've got exams coming up, and I think I'm going to fail them, and I'm not getting the education I deserve.
Makes me feel very angry, and I don't think they've got a right to stop my child, or any child, of having any education at all.
At one of the schools, they say there's simply no room, and it's not a problem they can be blamed for.
The places don't exist. There are insufficient places for the pupils who want them. It is not a situation of the school's making. The LEA has a responsibility to provide sufficient places, and this it hasn't done.
The local education authority says it has little control over self-governing schools and claims the crisis is the result of government policy.
In the long term, the only solution is for the power to admit to go back to local authorities. It's a complete nonsense that local children cannot go to local schools because foundation schools have the right to refuse admissions.
Today, the Department for Education called the problem unacceptable. In a statement, it said, "We will contact the County Council to help resolve the situation as a matter of urgency. It's a pity they didn't get in touch if they felt local conciliation wasn't working."
In the meantime, children who have exams to sit are going without schooling. Giles Latcham, BBC News, Wellingborough.
The Queen has been celebrating her 75th birthday quietly with the Duke of Edinburgh at Windsor Castle. This morning she went for a horseback ride around the grounds accompanied by her groom. In London's Hyde Park, the King's Troop Royal Horse Artillery fired a 41-gun salute. The official celebration of the Queen's birthday will be in 2 months' time at Trooping the Colour. Now with news of today's sport, here's Hazel Irvine.
Thanks, Nick. Good evening to you. Leicester have booked a springtime trip to Paris for Rugby Union's Heineken Cup final. The Premiership champions beat Gloucester in a tense semi-final at Vicarage Road today. They'll now take on French side Stade Francais for the trophy next month.
For some, Leicester are Rugby Union's equivalent of Manchester United. Domestic champions, they're also seeking European glory. Although playing Gloucester in Watford isn't quite like facing Bayern in Munich, they too made a bad start, conceding an early score. There, though, similarities ended as Leicester took control of a full-blooded encounter, with Tim Stimpson's powerful, elusive run setting up Leon Lloyd for the try which was ultimately to prove the difference between 2 highly committed sides. Stimpson's accurate kicking preserved Leicester's cushion, but Gloucester never stopped trying to flatten it. Though there was no let-up in the second half, it was notable chiefly for a fraying of tempers, with England captain Martin Johnson getting a spell in the sin bin. Gloucester's Simon Maddox kept their hopes flickering to the last, but Leicester held on to reach their second European Cup final. There they'll face Stade Francais on their own patch in Paris. Today, the French side just about prevailed by a single point over a determined Munster team. The game's only try was the difference, scored by Cliff Mitten. 16-15, the final score. Kevin Geary, BBC News.
To football, and Alex Nyarko, Everton's Ghanaian midfielder, has announced his retirement from the game after he suffered personal abuse from an Everton fan. The incident happened during his side's 4-1 defeat at Highbury when a supporter ran onto the pitch and offered to swap shirts, clearly indicating the player should leave the field. Nyarko then immediately asked to be substituted and said afterwards the same thing had happened 4 or 5 times since he arrived at Everton last summer. Well, that controversial incident and the matches at Portman Road, Filbert Street, Old Trafford and Upton Park are all on Match of the Day shortly, so if you don't want to know the scores, avert your eyes now. Tranmere Rovers have made their exit from the nationwide First Division. They were relegated despite this Andy Parkinson equaliser against Crystal Palace. It just wasn't enough to save them. And joining Tranmere in Division 2 will be Queen's Park Rangers, who lost at Huddersfield. Also on the way down are Swansea. They return to the 3rd Division, but they'll be replaced by another Welsh outfit, Cardiff, who were promoted this afternoon. In Scotland, the matches between Hibs and Kilmarnock and Motherwell versus St Johnstone are both featured on Sports Scene Match of the Day, so same drill. If you'd rather avoid those scores, look away again. Now, just over 5 hours to go until Britain's Lennox Lewis steps into the ring for the latest defence of his heavyweight boxing titles. The champion is odds-on favourite to beat his American challenger, Hasim Rahman, in Johannesburg.
It is South Africa's biggest ever boxing event, which is why they're leaving nothing to chance. The police have been sent to their corners in preparation for the fight they've dubbed Thunder in Africa. At last night's weigh-in, Lennox Lewis tipped the scales at 18 stone 1 pound. He wants to finish this match in 4 or 5 rounds, and he should have the height, the weight and the reach to defeat a relatively unknown opponent.
He's up against the undisputed heavyweight champion, so he's got to be a bit nervous, and you know, he's going to try and go out there and you know, smile and be cordial to people. So we're going to have to see what happens.
Hasim Rahman is around a stone lighter, though arguably better prepared. He spent 4 weeks here getting used to the thin Johannesburg air. Both boxers have also had to acclimatise to a fight time of 5 in the morning here. Lennox Lewis won't even rise from his bed until around 1 o'clock. A few hours later, he'll step into the ring for what many people believe will be a formality, the defence of his position as undisputed heavyweight champion of the world. David Eads, BBC News, Johannesburg.
And if you're planning a late night or even an early morning, don't forget that you can see and hear the fight on BBC One and Radio 5 live from 3:15 tomorrow morning. Nick.
Well, thanks very much indeed. A final look at the main news tonight. There's been more trouble on the streets of Quebec at the Summit of the Americas. That's the latest. There will, of course, be news throughout the night over on BBC News 24. But from Hazel and from me, a very good night to you.
Taking Breakfast with Frost, Shadow Home Secretary Anne Widdicombe. That's tomorrow morning from 9, and for this week only, over on BBC Two.
Good evening. I suspect there'll be somebody mad enough to run tomorrow's London Marathon in a pair of wellies. You're certainly going to need them as we move into next week. Perhaps rain heavy enough from Sunday evening through Monday into Tuesday to give some disruption across parts of England and Wales. And that's not an end to the wet weather, because later on during the week we could have another dollop of wet weather in the south, but as ever we'll keep you updated. But what is likely to happen is with this wet weather there'll be an increasing risk of flooding. Now, there has been some rain around today. You can see it showing up on the radar out to the west. The computer picks it up quite nicely and moves the main rain band slowly eastwards overnight, but you'll notice that it starts to head back to the west during Sunday, and then some heavy rain showing up Sunday evening, and that's the beginnings of that first dollop of wet weather that I mentioned earlier. So in the morning we're going to find some rain from the West Country up through the Midlands into northeast England, eastern parts of Scotland. Probably a dry but chilly start to the day in London. As the marathon progresses, though, the cloud will increase. Perhaps a few splashes of rain for the stragglers running their way up the Mall during the afternoon. But to the east of the Greenwich Meridian, it'll probably stay dry all day, and out to the west across Wales, Northern Ireland and western parts of Scotland, some sunshine and some showers once any morning fog gets out of the way. And temperature-wise, well, it'll be very close to what you'd expect at this time of year. Good night.
Tense action-adventure up in the mountains. Sylvester Stallone and John Lithgow star in the film Cliffhanger on BBC One at 11:45.
In every playground and every park, this is a dream come true. But now boys barely old enough to tie their laces are being hailed as football's future.
Kids are being offered astronomical sums of money.
30, 40, 50,000 pounds.
There's loads of clubs and they was all offering me good contracts and I was like 13, 14.
Temptation is on the table.
Did parents interfere too much? Yes. You know, there's good parents and bad parents.
But the final score could be the heartbreak of rejection.
Anybody who tells a young player is going to be a pro is either a cheat or a liar.
Alan Hansen opens the doors on football's Dream Factory, Tuesday at 10:35 on BBC One.
You can make your dreams happen if you want to.
I want to.
With top facts and figures, BBC Online has the complete football fans guide at bbc.co.uk/sport.
Well, the big hitters here on the gaming floor at Carnival City in Johannesburg are warming up, but the two biggest hitters of them all are still fast asleep. It's still 5.5 hours till Lennox Lewis defends his world heavyweight crown for the 10th time against Hasim Rahman of the USA. Part of the BBC commentary team tonight is the greatest middleweight of them all, Marvin Hagler. So what's going to happen?
I tell you something, I'm looking for a very exciting fight. I don't think anybody's going to sleep on this fight. Rodman with a name like the Rock, I mean, he could be a very dangerous fighter tonight for Lennox. But I feel as though that Lennox not too overconfident, and we're in for a big fight tonight.
That's live World Heavyweight Championship Boxing at 3:15 tonight on BBC One. Right now, footy's our sport.
Welcome to Match of the Day.
Good evening. The title race may be over, but there's still a bit to play for, you know. For George Burley's Ipswich, it's the unthinkable, a place in next season's Champions League. There's a more predictable target for Gordon Strachan, Coventry's continued Premier League status. Ipswich versus Coventry is our main game. Similar scenario at Upton Park, West Ham still not safe against Leeds, chasing a top 3 spot. Middlesbrough too are still fighting for their Premiership lives. We'll see them at Leicester. And we'll check upon Manchester City's survival hopes. They were playing a side with nothing left to play for. The champions, Manchester United. We'll have the best of the action and all the goals from the rest of the day's games. And Trevor and Mark will no doubt be talking out of both ends. Now, despite their contrasting league positions, there's a certain similarity in current form between Ipswich Town and Coventry City. Both teams have won 3 of their last 4 matches. The game at Portman Road was watched by Barry Davis.
The Premiership's leading scorer, a nominee for Players' Player of the Year. His teammates here at Portman Road have already given them the award of their Players' Player of the Year. The rise of Marcus Stewart has been the clearest image of the rise of Ipswich Town. The names are becoming increasingly familiar. No big names, it said, but it was suggested to me this morning that it really should be no big egos. 2 changes from the victory at Middlesbrough on Monday. John McGreal is fit again and replaces Mark Venus. And very late in the day, Keith Brannigan comes in to take over in goal because Richard Wright injured his back in the warm-up. 1 win for Europe, probably 3 needed if they're to get to the Champions League. But how many will it take for Coventry to escape again? They've had 3 wins in the last 4, and their team is unchanged from the latest, which was against Sunderland on Easter Monday.